It is fitting that Christ chose Judas to be one of the first apostles from among his disciples. It is fitting that one of the original members of Christ's church, of the body of Christ, was Judas, in spite of our failure. Not God's, man's failure. In spite of the fall of the angels, God still pulls light from darkness. Yes, something comes out of nothing, and it receives its existence from God. And yes, nothing does exist, and it receives its existence from God. And the fire of God's love, those that are pulled, separated from the darkness and brought into the light of that fire, they abide in that fire. They are warmed by that fire. They are purged by that fire. They are able to experience the perfection of that fire. And those that cling to the darkness, they are tormented by that fire, because they were created to abide in that fire, but they are in discord with their very existence. Christ chose Judas. So there, you can stop right there. That is why it is fitting. Christ is God, the second person of the Holy Trinity, without beginning, without end, in the Holy Trinity of the one triune God. And that fire of God's love, that fire of faith comes to us. That same fire from Pentecost has been passed down, carried on, and will continue into eternity in the church triumphant. That is the spirit of yes, of thy will be done, of I am a handmaid of the Lord, of correspondence to grace and conformity to God's will. The Spirit of God. Unfortunately, there are those who reject that Spirit, and instead they surrender to the spirit of hell. They become sons of Satan. They enter the kingdom of Satan. They choose hell. Christ warned us that there would be weeds in the garden, that the serpent is still there. We must guard against that enmity of the ancient serpent who does not conform to the will of God. We must guard against that spirit that took over the heart and soul of Judas. From the very beginning, Christ Church has had its Judases, and Christ promises for that to carry on to the end of time. So we are not to be discouraged, and we are not to place ourselves in some foolish judgment against God or against God's church. Because ultimately, the fulfillment of the body of Christ, of the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, of the mystical, spotless bride of Christ, ultimately, all of the imperfection will be purged away. In the fullness of time, the church, when we finally reach that point, if we are blessed enough, humble enough, surrendered enough to God, if we give our lives to God, and we find ourselves in the church triumphant, and all time has reached its fulfillment, and it's either you're a saint in heaven or you're a damned fool in hell. Everlasting. When we reach that point, the church is purified. And all those who chose not to be members in the body of Christ, who chose not to follow Christ, who chose not to live in God's kingdom, they will be dead in hell. Everlasting death. Judas. Judas reveals to us the fulfillment of salvation. Broad is the road that travel the path of Judas, and many follow Judas. Many indulge in that enmity of the ancient serpent. Many place themselves in discord with God's design for our salvation. Apart from the church, you have no salvation. Apart from the church, you have no salvation. And that church is not some fantasy you conjure up in your mind and you canonize yourself as a permanent member. And your private, personalized, invisible church. No. You must look to the apostles, and you must see that the office of Judas was filled by the acts of the apostles. That succession took place. And a disciple filled Judas's seat. And on it has continued. Just beware. Judas did it his way. And there is a lesson to be learned. There is a lesson. It is fitting that Christ gives us the choice. He gave Judas the choice. Don't follow Judas. follow the successors of the apostles who said yes to Christ. Thy will be done. Abide the fire.